3 weeks. That is all it took. 3 weeks between the moment she looked him in the eye and told him with complete sincerity that she was not interested, and the moment she was the one initiating contact. The one finding reasons to be where he was, the one sending messages she spent 20 minutes composing and then pretended were effortless. He did not chase her in those 3 weeks. He did not change his appearance or his approach or his personality. He did not try harder or softer or differently. He was 58 years old and he understood something that the version of himself at 32 had spent years getting brutally wrong. He understood that the most powerful thing he could do after she said no was nothing. Not nothing as in giving up, nothing as in continuing to be exactly who he was, completely and without adjustment, as if her answer had landed somewhere that simply did not have the power to rearrange him. And 3 weeks later, she was chasing him. I am going to tell you exactly what happened in those 3 weeks, not as a story, but as a psychological map. Because what this man did, mostly without any conscious strategy behind it, follows a pattern that repeats so consistently across so many different situations that it cannot be dismissed as luck or coincidence or the exception to a rule. It is the rule. And once you understand it, the word no will never mean to you what it used to mean. Stay with me until the end, because the last thing I'm going to tell you is the piece of this that nobody explains. The thing that happened in her nervous system in those 3 weeks that she herself could not have named or accounted for. The thing that turned her stated indifference into something she spent 3 weeks trying to understand and finally stopped trying to understand and simply followed. But before I go any further, I need to say something that I want every man watching this to actually hear. If you have ever been told no by a woman you were genuinely drawn to and walked away from that moment, carrying it like evidence of something, like proof of a limitation in you that you needed to fix or hide or compensate for, I need you to hear this clearly. That no was not about you, not in the way you think. Nobody ever taught you what a woman's no actually is in the early stages of attraction, where it comes from, what produces it, and what it has nothing to do with. The education you received about how women decide who they want was built on the wrong model entirely, on logic, on presentation, on demonstrating value through words and actions that the reasoning mind can evaluate. And female desire does not live in the reasoning mind. It never did. Tonight, you find out where it actually lives. And when you do, you will realize that the no's you collected were not the end of something. They were the beginning of something you did not know how to read. Here is what was actually happening, what she was really saying. When she told him she was not interested, she was telling him something true, something she genuinely believed in that moment. Her conscious mind had evaluated the available information and reached a conclusion. He was older than what she told herself she wanted. He did not fit the template she had constructed from years of social messaging about what attraction was supposed to look like. Her reasoning mind looked at the data and returned a verdict. What her reasoning mind did not have access to in that moment was everything that was about to happen below it. Neuroscience describes two parallel processing systems operating simultaneously in the human brain. The first is the deliberate system, slow, language based, logical, capable of constructing arguments and reaching conclusions. The second is the automatic system, fast, pre-verbal, pattern-based, and directly connected to the emotional and motivational structures that actually drive behavior. When she said she was not interested, her deliberate system was speaking. Her automatic system had not yet rendered a verdict because it had not yet received enough data. The data it was waiting for was not information about who he was. It was experience of how he made her feel. And that experience does not arrive in a single conversation. It accumulates. It builds. It arrives through exposure to how a man carries himself when the pressure is real, through the quality of his presence when there is nothing to perform for, through the specific texture of his internal world when he stops trying to present it and simply inhabits it in front of her. Her deliberate system said no before her automatic system had a chance to weigh in. And for the next 3 weeks, her automatic system was doing the work that her conscious declaration had tried to make unnecessary. The first thing that happened. The morning after she told him she was not interested, he sent her one message: not to revisit the conversation, not to make a case for himself or offer new evidence or ask for reconsideration. He sent something brief, warm, and completely unrelated to the dynamic of the night before. something that made it obvious he had heard her, accepted her answer without resentment, and was still himself, still open, still present, without any of the heaviness that rejection usually leaves behind in a man who needed the yes. She read it and felt something she did not expect. Not obligation, not guilt, something lighter than both of those things and harder to name. The absence of the weight she had anticipated. When a woman tells a man she is not interested, she braces, usually without knowing it, for the response that demonstrates how much she cost him. The withdrawal that signals damage, the overcorrection into performed indifference that signals pain being managed. The subtle shift in his behavior that tells her the rejection landed somewhere it reorganized him. None of that appeared. He was the same, and the sameness was disorienting in a way she did not have language for on that first morning, but would spend the next 3 weeks trying to resolve. This is what behavioral psychology calls rejection resilience. And it is one of the rarest and most attractive qualities the female nervous system encounters in men. Not because women want to reject men and watch them absorb it, but because a man who receives a no without being fundamentally altered by it is demonstrating something about the architecture of his identity that her automatic system immediately registers as significant. He is showing her that his sense of self was not located in her answer, that he arrived whole and he remained whole, that the version of him she met was not a performance assembled for her approval that collapses when the approval is withdrawn. That quality, the quality of a self that survives its own disappointment intact, is something that accumulates over decades. It is not teachable in a seminar or constructible through technique. It is built in the real moments of a real life. The losses that did not break him, the endings he walked through without losing himself on the other side, the times he chose his own standard over the comfort of being accepted. Every one of those moments added density to an identity that now at 58 does not require her yes to stand. Imagine what that feels like from her side. She said no, and he is still there, not hovering, not wounded, not performing recovery, simply there, the same man, in the same way, as if the conversation she thought would change the dynamic simply did not have the power to do that. For 3 weeks, that image kept returning to her without her permission. The second thing that happened. Pay close attention now, because what I am about to describe is the specific mechanism that turned her awareness of him into something that could no longer be categorized as indifference. He was living his life, fully, visibly, and without any apparent awareness that she was watching. Not performing a full life for her benefit, actually living one. She saw evidence of this through the ordinary residue of a man with genuine direction, a project he was absorbed in, friends whose company he was clearly present for, a sense of humor that was available to the moment rather than deployed for effect, the kind of aliveness that a person has when their days mean something to them independent of who is paying attention. This is where the dopamine mechanics I have described before become most visible and most powerful. The female brain's reward system is not activated by what is guaranteed. It is activated by what is compelling and not yet fully available. A man who is clearly, genuinely occupied by a life that does not pause in her direction creates the specific neurological condition for her attention to begin reaching toward him. Because reaching is what the reward system does in the presence of something that is real but not yet obtained. She was not chasing him because he was playing hard to get. She was chasing him because he was genuinely, demonstrably not waiting. And a man who is not waiting, a man whose life has enough weight in it that any addition to it would have to earn its place rather than simply fill an emptiness that was already there. That man creates a gravitational pull that a woman's conscious stated preferences have very little power to resist. I want to be honest about something here, something most women would not say publicly. I have caught myself moving toward men I initially dismissed, not because they changed something about themselves, but because I became aware that they were not thinking about whether I was moving toward them. That indifference to the outcome when it was real and not performed, when it was the natural result of a man who genuinely had somewhere else to be, produced in me exactly the kind of curiosity I had told myself I was not going to feel. If what I am saying is landing for you, take 2 seconds right now and hit the like button, because this is the conversation that most men were never given access to. And every person who engages with this video helps another man find it when he needs it most. Now, let me keep going because the next piece is where the chasing actually begins. The third thing that happened, listen carefully. This is the one that most men never see coming because it arrives not in a moment of obvious connection, but in a moment of ordinary, unguarded realness. About 10 days into those 3 weeks, they were in the same space again in a social context. Not a date, not an engineered encounter, simply the same room, the same evening, the same set of mutual circumstances that had been producing contact between them for weeks. And at some point in that evening, he said something. Not something impressive, not something designed to shift the dynamic or revisit the conversation from before. Something real, something that came directly from his actual inner world without any visible management between the thought and the expression of it. She could not have told you exactly what it was that changed in that moment. The content of the sentence was not remarkable, but the quality of it was. The specific texture of a man speaking directly from what is true for him, without editing it for effect, without monitoring how it was landing, without any of the gap between the inner experience and the outward expression that most people maintain continuously in social situations. That quality landed in her in a way that the most carefully constructed impression management could never have produced. This is somatic coherence arriving in real time. And when it appears in a conversation, her nervous system responds to it the way a tuning fork responds to its frequency, not through decision, through resonance. Something in her matches something in him at a level that precedes thought, and the matching produces a recognition that her deliberate system immediately begins trying to make sense of. The sense she made of it over the following week was what she called to her closest friend, with a kind of bewildered honesty, a feeling she could not explain. She kept describing it as something real, not exciting, not dramatic, not the electric surface charge that she had trained herself to chase in younger men. Something real, something with weight, something that made the thing she had told herself she wanted feel slightly hollow by comparison. That hollowness is the feeling of a template being dismantled from the inside, of a woman's conscious preferences being quietly, persistently overwritten by her actual experience, and the man who produces that experience does not know he is producing it. He is simply being so completely himself that her template could not contain him. This is exactly what Madison Miller explores in complete depth, because understanding how to carry that quality of realness into ordinary interactions, the specific texture of presence that creates this kind of resonance, is the most nuanced and most powerful thing a man can develop. But let me give you the last piece now because it closes the entire 3 weeks. The fourth thing that happened. Here's the thing I told you at the beginning that nobody explains. The thing that was happening in her nervous system across all 3 weeks simultaneously, underneath everything visible that she herself could not have named or articulated, but that was driving her behavior from below the surface. She was becoming afraid of missing something real. Not afraid of him, not afraid of rejection or vulnerability or any of the ordinary things people are afraid of in the context of attraction. Afraid of the specific, particular, irreplaceable experience of being known by a man who was genuinely worth being known by. Afraid that this specific quality of presence, this specific weight of selfhood, was not something she was going to encounter everywhere. That it had a scarcity that her previous template had left her completely unprepared to evaluate. This is what distinguishes the obsession that builds around a man of genuine substance from the surface level fixation that younger men more easily produce. The fixation younger men produce is exciting. It is high frequency, high intensity, and it fades at roughly the same speed it arrived because it was never rooted in anything with actual depth. What builds around a man of genuine substance is different in kind, not degree. It is slower to arrive and exponentially more difficult to leave because it is not organized around the electricity of uncertainty about surface qualities. It is organized around the far more unsettling uncertainty of whether she is going to allow herself to be close enough to something real to find out what it actually is. By the end of the 3rd week, she was not chasing him because she had changed her mind about what she wanted. She was chasing him because her nervous system had already made a decision that her stated preferences had not yet caught up to. And rather than continue trying to reconcile the gap between what she said and what she felt, she stopped trying to reconcile it and followed what was underneath. That is the map, not of what he did, of what he was. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a strategy that exhausts itself and an identity that compounds over time. You do not become the man who produces this in 3 weeks of deliberate effort. You become him over years of choosing in the private moments that nobody witnesses to be the real version rather than the presented version, to hold your ground when it costs something, to stay yourself when the environment is asking you to adjust, to build a life with enough weight in it that your presence carries something she has never encountered in the more obvious places she was taught to look. He was 58. And those 58 years, every loss and failure and rebuilding and ordinary mourning of living a life with genuine direction, every one of them had produced something that fit none of her templates and answered every question her nervous system was actually asking. She told him she was not interested. She was not lying. Her deliberate mind had reached a conclusion based on the information it had, but her automatic mind had not yet weighed in. And in 3 weeks of contact with what he actually was, rather than what she had categorized him as, her automatic mind rendered its verdict. She was chasing him. That verdict was not about his age. It was about who he had become inside his age and who a man becomes inside his years if he chooses to build something real rather than simply recover from what was taken is the most irreversible and most attractive thing he will ever be. Subscribe to this channel right now because this is where we go beneath every surface level conversation about attraction and find the real architecture underneath. Like this video and send it to the man who has been reading the wrong map for too long. The right one was always available. Now he has it.